series on the Bible creation account, and in today's teaching we're going to look at day 4 of the Genesis creation account. And that account basically is the description to us of God's creation of the solar system in which the earth is located. And we pick up that account in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 to 19. Scripture says, "Then God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens, to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the 4th day. And so on this particular creation day event, day 4, we see God creating the solar system, also the stars. We'll have a look at the stars now. But with regards to God's creation of the solar system, obviously central to his creation of the solar system was the sun, which is the focal point, so to speak, of the Earth's, the solar system in which the Earth is located. And so it was at this point that the light from heaven was replaced with the light from the sun. But we see also, as I say, in this particular account in Scripture, that the stars are also mentioned on this day, because they also contribute to the light on the earth. And that's the reason why, even when on a night when the moon is not shining, there is still not absolute darkness on the earth, because there's always the light that reaches the earth from the stars that are in the universe. And so the earth is always experiencing some form of light, whether it be sunlight, moonlight, or starlight. It never experiences absolute darkness. It's the way God has created everything around the earth, which is another reason why Scripture again just points us to the fact that the earth is central to God's creation, because all of these creations of God that are in the universe today, God has created them to give light on the earth. And that's just, as I say, another indicator to us in Scripture as to the centrality of the earth in God's creation. And so a comment that we need to make here is a comment about the creation of the stars, which in this passage is really only mentioned in passing. For in verse 16, God just says, the stars also. So why is that? Why does God only mention the creation of the stars in passing? Because he mentioned more clearly the creation of the sun and the moon. Well, the reason that God only mentions the creation of the stars in passing on creation event day 4 is because the stars actually began to form after creation event day 2, and they had been forming all the way up until this point of creation event day 4. And science agrees with that concept, because science has basically been able to estimate that the stars actually began to form in the universe roughly about 400 million years after the event of the Big Bang itself, when the universe was brought into existence, and that we saw related to creation event day 2. That's when God created the universe. And so from that point onwards, throughout all of creation, even up until now, when I say now, we're talking about relatively recent in the history of the universe, God's formation of stars began and has continued even up until most recently, roughly about 12 million years ago, is the age of the youngest star that scientists have been able to estimate. And so with regards to the formation of the stars, that have been taking place over a period of time. What in fact that scientists have been able to extrapolate from that is a very important observation, because that in fact is one of the most important observation that led the scientists to develop the theory of the Big Bang. Because what scientists observed is that the stars in the universe are all drifting away from the Earth. So in other words, as the universe expands, so it is that the stars are receding away from the Earth as time progresses. And so what they were able to do is then extrapolate that information and condense that information, and thus be able to determine that as the stars are, or galaxies really, are traveling away from the Earth at whatever different rates they are traveling away from the Earth, they could do the calculation backwards and thus be able to estimate that there was a point in time where the universe existed in one point in space. And that is that very dense, very hot point in space that they say that the universe began from. We in Scripture know that to be from the Earth itself. The Earth was the central point. Science disagrees with that. At this point in time, they'll eventually catch up. And so that's where the Big Bang Theory really came into being, was through scientific observation of how the stars in the universe are in fact growing further and further and further apart from each other, and also from the Earth. And so, as I say, they were able to bring that back to the original point in time. But even, as I said, as stars are formed today, what we see in Scripture and also in science concur with each other, because the way God's creation takes place, and we see it in the earth, we see it all over, what God does is He creates new life. That life matures and becomes old, and then it dies, and then God replaces it with new life. And so the cycle continues. Now that cycle that we see very clearly on the earth also is taking place even in the universe. And so new stars were formed right from close to 14 billion years ago. As I say, science has estimated that roughly 400 million years after the Big Bang event occurred, that first explosion that began to extrapolate and expand the universe, the stars began to form, and have continued to form throughout the ages, even until now. And so the oldest stars that scientists have been able to estimate in the universe, galaxies should I say really, because the way that stars populate the universe is that there are galaxies. Within the galaxies there are billions and billions of stars, and so there are hundreds of billions of galaxies. Within each galaxy there's hundreds and billions of stars. The galaxy in which the Earth is located is known as the Milky Way galaxy, and so that particular galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars, of which the Sun is one. And then the Earth and the planets that revolve around the Sun form the solar system within the Milky Way galaxy, within the universe. So I trust that you understand how it works. Anyway, what science has been able to determine is that the oldest galaxies that they can see in the universe, and they have scientific methods of being able to do the calculation. They estimate the oldest galaxies to be roughly 14 billion years old. Now that kind of equates back with the estimation of the age of the universe, because obviously the logic is that the universe cannot be any younger than the oldest stars that are located within it. And so, as we saw in Creation Day 2, the cosmic radiation background that scientists can observe have estimated that the age of the universe is roughly 4.5 billion years old. And so with regards to scientific observation of the ages of the galaxies in the universe, the oldest that they can identify is roughly 14 billion years old, which then places it well within the 14.5 billion years that they've aged the universe to be. But what they've also been able to do is see that there are younger and younger stars also in the universe. The youngest star that they've identified thus far is 12 million years old. And so what science have observed, again, in as far as the universe is concerned, also concurs with Scripture, because what the scientists have observed is that new stars are formed, they mature, they die, and thus are done away with. And that's exactly how life is, God has created life to be. And with regards to the stars in the universe, one of the other aspects that the scientists have come to realize is that new star formation in the universe is beginning to slow down. And so the very clearly scientific observation is concurring with the way God has created his physical creation, in that new life begins, eventually matures, and then eventually ages and eventually dies. The universe is going the same route. New life began roughly 14, when I say new life of the universe began roughly 14.5 billion years ago. Stars began to form roughly 14 billion years ago, galaxies. Those stars are beginning to age, mature, they will eventually die. The rate of new star formation in the universe is slowing down quite considerably. And God himself talks around that point in Psalm 102, verse 25 to 26. God himself has said that the universe will eventually grow old like a garment. It will be folded up and put away. And God will then create new once again. So the universe is going the way that all of God's creation goes, as are the stars and the galaxies within God's universe. And so that brings us to the creation of the solar system itself, in which the Earth is located, which we said the Sun is the central point too. Now, scientists estimate that the age of the solar system within the universe is roughly 4.5 billion years old. So the age of the Sun they've been able to estimate through scientific observation and calculation to be roughly 4.5 billion years old. And then they are able to also estimate the age of the Moon and the various planets around the Sun, and the meteorites that are around the Sun to also be roughly 4.5 billion years old. Now they do that because they've been able to obviously get lunar rocks from the Moon itself, and they've been able to get samples of meteoric rocks that have fallen to the Earth. Now, in the aging of the lunar rocks and the rocks from the various meteors that have struck the Earth, those platforms are relatively stable. What do I mean by that? Well, there's no volcanic activity taking place on the Earth or amongst the meteors that are out there in space. And so when they age the rocks of the Moon and age the rocks of the various meteors out there, because those platforms are relatively stable, the relative accuracy of their aging being 4.5 billion years, because that's what they have been able to come up with through their radioisotope testing and radiometric testing of those rock samples. The accuracy, the relative accuracy of the age of the Moon and the planets around the stars, and also the star itself, should I say the Sun itself, being 4.5 billion years, is relatively accurate. There's no dispute between the scriptures and science in this area. However, what scientists then do is they use that same method to then date the age of the Earth. And so they look at the oldest rocks that they can find on the Earth, and they date them in the same manner. And they come up with a figure of roughly 4.5 billion years. And so their viewpoint is that the Earth has to be the same age as the Sun, as the Moon, and as the solar system, the planets that revolve around the Sun, and also the meteors and the various meteoric rocks that have fallen to the Earth. The problem with that hypothesis, though, is that the rocks on the Earth are not stable. What do I mean by that? Well, the way that the Earth's crust is formed, the way God has formed it, is that the Earth has these tectonic plates that they are, I'm talking about the land surface of the Earth. Even under the sea, the tectonic plates form part of the crust of the Earth. They're not stable. So what in fact takes place is that new crust is being formed all the time, because if you understand the way that the tectonic plates work on the crust of the Earth, is you have the two plates, and there's numerous plates on the Earth that the Earth's crust is made up of. And so when the two tectonic plates meet each other, what happens is the one plate is forced down into the inner part of the Earth, while the other plate slides over it. And that's where we get our earthquakes from, because of the activity that takes place between the two plates. So over time, what happens is that the Earth's crust is forced back into the hot magma of the Earth. Now, when that happens, that crust is then melted in the magma of the Earth. And new crust is formed on the other boundaries of those tectonic plates through volcanic activity. So the Earth's crust is constantly renewing itself. That's really the crux of the matter. And so the rocks on the Earth today, although they might be 4.5 billion years old, they're not the same rocks that were on the Earth roughly 5 billion years ago, so to speak. And so the age of the Earth rocks cannot be determined by looking at the Earth's crust, because the Earth's crust is constantly being renewed. When I say constantly, well, it is happening constantly, but the crust of the Earth is being renewed over billions and billions of years. And so it is not possible to take the same process that we can do with the moon, for argument's sake, and with the meteors, by looking at the age of the moon's rocks and saying, well, now that's the age of the Earth as well. Because, as I say, the moon is a relatively stable platform. It has no volcanic activity, whereas the Earth does. The moon doesn't have tectonic plates, whereas the Earth does. And so the crust of the Earth is changing all the time. So it is erroneous for scientists to take that same method, look at the rocks on the Earth and say, well, that's the age of the Earth, because it's not. And then, as we say, Scripture is very plain to us that the Earth is in fact far older than the 14 billion years of the universe. Something else that science is starting to play catch up with regards to Scripture, with regards to the age of the Earth, is that science has discovered relatively recently that the water on the Earth is in fact older than the sun. Now, that we know from Scripture to be exactly right, because don't forget, we said right from the outset that water encapsulated the Earth, and the universe was created from God separating the waters from the waters. And so the waters on the Earth will always be older than the universe that surrounds it, and certainly will be far older than the sun and the solar system, which God only created on day 4 of creation. And so an article posted in the New Scientist in 2014 by a Dr. Natalie Starkey has discovered really that the Earth that is on the Earth today, the water that is on the Earth today, is in fact far older than the sun itself. Now, the explanation thereof doesn't tie in with Scripture, because their viewpoint is, well, that water has come in from the universe that surrounded it. But we, as biblical scholars, understand that Scripture actually shows us that the water was always on the Earth, that the water was there before the universe was created, and thus that is the reason why the water that is on the earth can be scientifically proven to be older than the sun itself. That, as I say, scientific discovery is always playing catch up with Scripture, but eventually they might catch up. Who knows? God does. And so that is the creation event that occurred on day 4. God created the sun, the moon, and the planets. He didn't create the stars on creation event day 4. He began to create the stars on creation event day 2. He continued to create them throughout the Genesis creation account. That creation of God, the stars that is, seems to have ended roughly 12 million years ago, because science has not been able to discover any stars younger than 12 million years old. However, they have discovered stars and galaxies that are roughly 14 billion years old, which ties in with the age of the universe. And that brings us to the end of creation day 4. When I say the end, I'm talking about the discussion of creation day 4. We will move on in the next teaching onto creation day 5 and what it is that God created after this event. But we're going to end the teaching on that point today.